Every day, millions of people scroll through carefully curated images of other people's lives, collect likes on their own posts, and maintain hundreds of digital connections. Yet research consistently shows that heavy social media users report feeling lonelier and less satisfied than ever before. This isn't a coincidence. The original promise of social media was simple and appealing. These platforms would connect people across distances, strengthen relationships, and create communities that transcended physical boundaries. In many ways, they delivered on that promise. A person can now maintain contact with childhood friends, stay updated on family members living across the world, and join groups of people who share niche interests. The connectivity is real and measurable. But something unexpected happened alongside this connection. Studies tracking well-being and social media usage over the past decade reveal a troubling pattern. People who spend more time on these platforms often report lower life satisfaction, increased feelings of isolation, and a persistent sense that something is missing. The technology designed to bring people together seems to be leaving many feeling more alone than before. Psychology suggests this isn't about the technology itself, but about what happens when human social needs meet systems designed for engagement rather than fulfillment. The average person now spends over 2 hours daily on social media platforms, checking their phone dozens of times throughout the day. Yet despite this constant connection, the quality of that connection rarely matches the quantity. A person might interact with 50 people in a day through comments and reactions, but leave those interactions feeling strangely unsatisfied, as if they've consumed empty calories when they needed actual nourishment. The disconnect becomes clearer when researchers compare online interactions with face-to-face conversations. Digital exchanges tend to be brief, surface-level, and transactional. They lack the depth, vulnerability, and sustained attention that characterize meaningful human connection. A quick comment on someone's post feels like connection, and in a sense it is, but it doesn't fulfill the deeper social needs that humans evolved to require. The result is a peculiar modern experience where a person can be constantly connected yet fundamentally lonely. At the center of social media's impact on well-being sits a fundamental psychological mechanism: social comparison. Humans have always compared themselves to others. This behavior helped our ancestors assess their standing in their communities and identify areas for growth. But traditional social comparison happened within limited contexts. A person compared themselves to neighbors, co-workers, and people they actually knew. Social media changed the scale and nature of comparison entirely. Now, a person compares their everyday reality not to their actual peers, but to carefully edited highlight reels from hundreds or thousands of people. A colleague posts about a promotion. An acquaintance shares vacation photos from an exotic location. A former classmate announces a major achievement. Each post represents someone's best moment, filtered and framed for maximum impact. Research indicates that people intellectually understand this curation. They know the photos are selected, the captions are crafted, and the reality behind the posts is more complex than what appears. Yet this intellectual understanding doesn't prevent the emotional response. When someone scrolls through their feed during an ordinary Tuesday evening, watching others seem to live extraordinary lives, their brain processes those images as reality. The comparison happens automatically, often below conscious awareness. Consider what happens in a typical workplace scenario. An employee receives positive feedback on a project they completed. They feel satisfied with their work. Later that day, they see a former colleague post about leading a major initiative at a prestigious company. Suddenly, their own achievement feels smaller. They didn't change. Their work didn't become less valuable. But the context shifted, and with it, their sense of accomplishment diminished. This pattern repeats across different life domains. A person feels content with their home until they scroll through interior design posts. They enjoy a meal until they see someone else's elaborate dining experience. They appreciate their relationship until they view endless posts of couples appearing perfectly happy. The emptiness comes not from lacking anything real, but from the constant exposure to an impossible standard. The combined highlights of hundreds of lives presented as if they were ordinary existence. The psychology of this comparison trap extends beyond simple envy. It creates a cycle where people then curate their own posts more carefully, contributing to the same system that makes them feel inadequate. They photograph their experiences with sharing in mind rather than enjoying the moment. They craft captions that present their lives in the best light, and in doing so, they become both victims and perpetuators of a system that trades authenticity for appearance. Social media platforms are engineered with precision. Teams of designers and psychologists work to maximize engagement, and they've become remarkably effective at it. At the neurological level, these platforms tap into the brain's reward system in ways that create powerful behavioral patterns. When someone posts content and receives positive feedback, likes, comments, shares, their brain releases dopamine. This neurotransmitter is associated with pleasure and reward, and it creates a feeling of satisfaction. But here's where the design becomes particularly effective. The feedback doesn't come all at once or on a predictable schedule. It arrives sporadically. A like might come immediately, or hours later, or not at all. This unpredictability is crucial. Behavioral psychology has long understood that variable reward schedules create stronger conditioning than predictable rewards. This is the same mechanism that makes gambling addictive. The uncertainty of when the next reward will come keeps people engaged far longer than if rewards arrived on a fixed schedule. Every time someone checks their phone to see if anyone responded to their post, they're engaging with this variable reward system. Research indicates that the satisfaction from these digital rewards is real but temporary. The dopamine spike feels good in the moment, but it fades quickly, often leaving people wanting more. A person posts a photo and receives 30 likes in the first hour. They feel pleased. But the next day, when they post something similar and receive only 15 likes, they feel disappointed. The reward wasn't inherently less valuable, but the expectation had shifted. The platform has trained them to need more engagement to feel the same level of satisfaction. This creates a particular type of emptiness. The pleasure is genuine but fleeting, while the need for validation becomes persistent. Someone might check their notifications dozens of times throughout the day, each time hoping for that small dopamine hit. During a work meeting, while having dinner with family, before falling asleep. The pattern interrupts presence and sustained attention. The constant checking becomes habitual, often occurring without conscious decision. What makes this particularly insidious is how it differs from deeper forms of satisfaction. When someone engages in meaningful work, builds a skill, or has a substantive conversation, the satisfaction tends to last longer and accumulate over time. These activities build a sense of competence, purpose, and connection that persists. The quick hits of validation from social media, by contrast, fade rapidly and need constant renewal. It's the difference between a nutritious meal that sustains energy for hours and a sugary snack that provides a brief spike followed by a crash. Something subtle but significant happens when people begin experiencing life through the lens of social media. The focus shifts from the experience itself to how that experience will be perceived by others. Psychology suggests this shift fundamentally alters the quality of the experience. Consider a person attending a concert. In previous decades, they would focus entirely on the music, the atmosphere, the feeling of being present in that moment. Now many attendees spend significant portions of the event filming for their stories or trying to capture the perfect photo. The experience becomes secondary to its documentation. Research on memory formation indicates that this split attention actually weakens the memory of the event itself. The person has a record of being there, but a diminished recollection of what it felt like to be there. This replacement extends beyond events to everyday interactions. During social gatherings, people often engage partially with those present while simultaneously maintaining digital conversations with people who aren't there. A dinner with friends becomes punctuated by phone checks, photo sharing, and divided attention. The irony is striking. People gather physically to connect, then spend portions of that gathering connecting with people elsewhere. The emptiness emerges from a specific loss, the loss of full presence. Human connection requires attention, vulnerability, and engagement that's difficult to achieve when part of one's awareness is always oriented toward a digital audience. When someone shares an experience online in real time, They're simultaneously experiencing it and stepping outside it to observe and curate it. This dual awareness prevents the kind of full immersion that creates rich, meaningful experiences. Often observed is the phenomenon where people feel compelled to document experiences primarily because they're shareable rather than because they're personally meaningful. A person might visit a location not because they're genuinely interested in it, but because it will create impressive content. The experience is selected for its external value rather than its internal meaning. This inverts the natural priority. Instead of sharing meaningful experiences, people seek experiences to share. Every person presents different aspects of themselves in different contexts. This is normal and healthy. Someone might be professional at work, playful with friends, and vulnerable with close family. But social media introduces a unique challenge. It collapses these contexts while simultaneously demanding careful self-presentation to a broad, undefined audience. The cognitive load of this is substantial. A person must consider how their post will be perceived by their employer, their family, acquaintances from high school, and people they barely know. They must maintain a persona that's interesting but not boastful, authentic but not too vulnerable, present but not oversharing. This constant self-monitoring is mentally exhausting in ways that often go unrecognized. Research on authenticity suggests that people feel most fulfilled when their external presentation aligns with their internal experience. But the nature of social media makes this alignment difficult. The platform rewards certain types of content, positive updates, achievements, aesthetic photos, while discouraging others. Struggles, doubts, and ordinary moments rarely perform well in terms of engagement. So people learn to present an edited version of themselves, emphasizing some aspects while suppressing others. The emptiness comes from living with this split. A person might be struggling with anxiety but posts cheerful content because that's what the platform rewards. They receive positive responses to this curated version of themselves, which feels validating but also hollow, because the validation is for a performance rather than their actual self. Over time, this creates a strange disconnection where someone can feel simultaneously seen and invisible. Their persona is visible and validated, but their authentic self remains hidden. This fragmentation affects relationships in subtle ways. When two people interact primarily through social media, they're relating to each other's curated personas rather than their full selves. A friendship that exists largely through comments and messages lacks the depth that comes from witnessing someone in their unguarded moments, seeing how they handle difficulties, and sharing experiences that don't need to be documented or presented. Human beings require deep connection to thrive. Psychology has consistently demonstrated that relationship quality matters far more than relationship quantity for well-being. One close friend who truly knows someone contributes more to their happiness than dozens of casual acquaintances. Yet social media's design fundamentally favors breadth over depth. The structure of these platforms encourages brief, frequent interactions rather than sustained, meaningful exchanges. A person might comment on 20 posts in the time it would take to have one substantial conversation. The quick reaction feels like connection, and in a minimal sense, it is. But it doesn't provide what deeper interaction offers. The experience of being truly known, of having someone engage thoughtfully with your ideas, of feeling that your presence matters beyond a momentary acknowledgement. Research indicates that meaningful conversation requires several elements that social media typically lacks: sustained attention, vulnerability, reciprocal disclosure, and presence without distraction. These elements are difficult to achieve through text-based interaction with an audience, even when that audience consists of friends. The format itself constrains the depth possible. What often goes unrecognized is how social media interaction can create an illusion of connection that actually prevents deeper connection from forming. When someone briefly interacts with a friend online, they might feel they've maintained that relationship without recognizing that the relationship has become shallower over time. They know what their friend is doing, what they ate, where they traveled, what they accomplished. But they might not know how their friend actually feels, what they're struggling with, or what matters most to them. The emptiness that results from this surface-level engagement is particularly insidious because it's easy to misidentify. A person might feel lonely while simultaneously believing they're socially connected because they interact with many people daily. They mistake activity for intimacy, confusing the feeling of being visible with the deeper satisfaction of being understood. The relationship between social media and emptiness isn't simple or universal. These platforms genuinely connect people who would otherwise lose touch. They create communities around shared interests and experiences. They provide support networks and information access that previous generations lacked. The technology itself is neutral, a tool that can serve various purposes. Yet the evidence consistently suggests that something about how most people use these platforms leaves them feeling less satisfied rather than more. The mechanisms are clear: constant comparison to curated realities, engineered engagement systems that provide temporary satisfaction without lasting fulfillment, the replacement of presence with performance, the exhaustion of maintaining personas, and the substitution of depth with breadth in social connection. What makes this particularly challenging is the gap between awareness and behavior. Many people recognize these dynamics intellectually. They understand that others curate their posts, that the likes and comments don't constitute real connection, that their attention is being manipulated by design. Yet this understanding rarely translates into changed behavior. The pull of the platforms remains strong, the habits are deeply ingrained, and the fear of missing out keeps people engaged even when that engagement consistently leaves them feeling empty. Perhaps the emptiness serves a purpose. Perhaps it's a signal, the same way physical discomfort signals that something needs attention. The feeling might be indicating a mismatch between how humans are designed to connect and how these platforms facilitate connection. The question isn't whether social media is inherently good or bad, but whether the way someone uses it serves their actual needs or merely their conditioned impulses. The answer to that question requires honest self-examination. It requires noticing how one actually feels after time spent scrolling, comparing that to how one feels after genuine connection, and deciding whether the trade-off is worthwhile. It's not a decision that needs to be absolute, complete abstinence versus total immersion. But it is a decision that deserves conscious consideration rather than default acceptance. The relationship between technology and well-being will continue evolving as these platforms change and as people develop new patterns of use. What remains constant is the human need for authentic connection, for depth over breadth, for presence over performance. Understanding why social media often leaves people feeling empty is a step toward using it more intentionally, in ways that genuinely serve rather than deplete. What has your experience been? The comments are open for reflection and discussion.